There's Benny. All right, good morning, everybody. I'm a second or so late here. That's way brighter than I needed it to be right now. About that. Too bright. We'll just do this the regular way. No, I gotta set this one up a little bit here. This one should be way less bright. Figure that, yeah. Morning, Karen, Denise, Carrie, Susan, Jean, Luann, Martin. Hey, Dina and Karen. Hey, Elaine. Morning, Vicky. Hey, everybody. Morning, Cindy and Detroit. Hey, Betsy. Good morning, everybody. Working from home today, but I got some cool stuff to show you. Hey, Linda. I have not made coffee yet today. What in the world is wrong with me? How am I functioning right now? Hey, Bob, how you doing? Hey, Lynn. Hey, Timothy. Hope you're feeling better, Bob. Morning, Jerry in Arizona. Hey, Mom. Everybody's heading down to... Mom, Dad, and Grandma are heading down to the retirement house. It's all right. I've just been up busy with analyzing data all morning, so that gives me enough of a buzz. Morning, Todd. Jeff, I have a drip machine, a pour over, and an AeroPress. I do not have a Keurig. Hey, Nancy. Hey, Heather. Hey, Ava. I don't have enough of a palate to really know when I'm having a really good coffee, so like a pour over and a drip isn't necessarily that different for me. Depends on how much work I want to put into it. Hey, Steve. Hey, Lenora. But, 30 some odd years, about 30 years now of a chronic sinus infection will kind of mess with your palate. Morning, Tato. Hey, Joey. Yeah, it's pretty but not so pretty that I wanted to go take pictures in it today. I need a little more cloud cover for that. All right, Bob, good to hear. No surgery, taking off the IV pole. Susan, I do have a French press as well. Well, as Johann Hawk said, the coffee in Chicago is terrible, but you can't knock the beer. Morning, Laura. Yeah, I had the French press out the other day. It's just the cleanup, Hey, Lisa. It was like, the great question of the lockdown era was, where can I get a good cup of coffee in this apartment? Hey, Grandma Bell. Interesting statement from Bob Dylan last night that he's been suffering from vertigo attacks the last few years. Which explains a lot about his stage setup the last couple of tours where he's barely been, really leaning on the piano a lot. Barely came out from behind it and sometimes even had his face, covered by boxes of crackers or something so you could barely see him. Hey, Sofa. Over on Twitch. Yeah, Bob's been in the hospital a couple of days. I don't pry about more data than that. Bob Wilson over in the data here. I don't mean Bob Dylan. I don't know how he's doing personally. Just saw his statement last night, which is about as much as he'd ever said about his health, except when he had histoplasmosis in the 90s. And even then, it was just like, I really thought I was going to see Elvis soon. Yeah, and I think the hipster way to go is generally the, what do you call it? I've got one, the pour-over thing. The thing that's like this and then like this. Well, the vacuum tube, you can get one of those. Those are the best. One time back in my Starbucks working days 20 years ago, we had this machine Mine started leaking pretty quickly, but they let me have the sample of it, where you pour the coffee in and it gets like sucked up by vacuum and then whooshes back down. And it was really delicious coffee too. It made really good coffee. Like, you can say what you want about Starbucks beans, most of their blends don't do much for me, but their machines at the time were excellent. But alright, I think that's enough chit-chat out of me as we get started here, so welcome along everybody to another morning mini tour this holiday weekend. One of my favorite holidays. Screw the Pilgrims. This is for celebrating kicking Confederate butt. I'm working on some data about whether the whole thing about mixing the Pilgrim story into the November Thanksgiving might be part of people trying to like whitewash the Civil War in the early 20th century. But all right, welcome along everybody. Those of you just joining us, I'm Adam Seltzer of Mysterious Chicago Tours. Some recent books include Graceland Cemetery, Chicago's Stories, Symbols, and Secrets, Murder Maps USA, and probably my biggest, from about 5 years ago, H.H. Holmes, The True History of the White City Devil. Now, working on the follow-up to this one now. I've been working, for those of you who follow this along quite a bit, I've been working on a serial killer story from about 10 years after Holmes, which was the story of Johann Hawk, one of my other favorite serial killers to research. There's a lot of web pages and chapters of books about him, but nobody's ever really gone through the data and figured out what they said about him was true, what wasn't. By the time they caught up with Johann Hawk, he had already proposed to what they thought would have been wife number 55. And from what I've been able to tell, he's been accused of marrying about 80 different women over the course of his career that were at least named. Probably more than that. But of those, about 20 were probably people he actually married, and 5 or 6 of them he probably did in fact murder. But what we're going to cover today is I've been kind of scatterbrained about this. Like last week I was doing a lot of research on Harry Olson, the state's attorney who prosecuted him in court in his later career. I've been doing a lot about Gene Cowgill, a reporter who worked to try to get his release. But now I'm bouncing backwards. I'm always bouncing all over the story with research, which is, perfect for an old ADD kid like me. But lately I've been researching his early period in the United States when he first came to town, when he first came to Wheeling, West Virginia. Well, really, he was living in Boggs Run, which is south of Wheeling, where he opened up a saloon here at 43rd and Jacob. Well, this is 48th and Jacob. But there's also some different opinions about different listings of exactly where his building was. Or this might have been one of the buildings that he operated the saloon out of. He arrived in the United States in January of 1895. Within 10 days, he had bought a saloon in Wheeling. That's really pretty impressive. That he got off of the boat January 22nd. By February 3rd, he had a saloon miles away from New York where he landed. But here in Wheeling, there was a woman living by the name of Carolyn Hawk. Originally, her name was Carolyn Miller or Catherine Miller. It goes back and forth with a lot of these. People use variant spellings of their last name, and women would use 2 or 3 different first names, each of which was spelled in a number of different ways. Carolyn was married to a guy by the name of Adolph Hawk. This is their wedding record, and really quite a bit of what I can tell about Carolyn comes from here. For one thing, it calls her Carolyn here with a K. Muller is her name. And she was 26, he was 25, so she would have been born, based on this, 1858 or 1859, meaning she was 3 or 4 years older than Hawk was. So here's the thing about Adolph Hawk. They were married for 7 years, the two of them, here in West Virginia. There is a story, another one that I've been tracing as a process of this research, is there is a durable legend that around 1818 or so, the first shipment of ice was brought to New Orleans. Now, they had seen ice in New Orleans before. Sometimes the river would freeze up a bit in the wintertime, but this was the summertime, and somebody shipped a cargo of ice, which about a decade later would be a big business in New Orleans. But in 1818, the mayor, Augustin McCarty, immediately had all of that ice destroyed. He called out the fire department, he called out the police department, had them throw it into the mouth of the Mississippi River and let it melt down. Because otherwise, people might start drinking the ice water, which he believed was very dangerous. It was a kind of a thing at the time. In fact, Benjamin Rush, one of our founding fathers, wrote in 1789 that in the summertime in Philadelphia, sometimes 4 or 5 people a day would die from drinking ice water. The idea was it would cause shock to your system, or it would cause consumption by exposing your lungs to stuff that was that cold. Different theories about it. Today, there are isolated cases when drinking ice water when you're really hot, usually if you're also dehydrated or going into heat stroke or something, can cause a shock to the system and can be dangerous. Certainly not 4 or 5 people a day in just one city, though. But it was thought to be a fairly durable myth at the time, partly because it allowed people to say, hey, I'm not drinking ice water, that's dangerous. I'll just stick with some good, safe alcohol. Just give me some of that nice, safe beer. Now, I haven't been able to verify the McCarty story. I've been able to trace it back to about 1888. There was an article about it in Harper's, but I can't really find an actual verification of it beyond that. However, I did find that McCarty was a cousin of Delphine LaLaurie, the New Orleans serial killer. So everything is all connected. But anyway, when Adolf Hock died in 1892, it was later said that he died from drinking ice water. Now, the official cause of death on the death record here, you can see he's scrawled out there. They called him Adolf Hay, but that's his date of death, and that's his address. Died of heart failure. Now, age 31, that's kind of unusual to die of heart failure, but it's also unusual to die of ice water cramps. The story about ice water cramps actually came from the Justice of the Peace to whom Adolf dictated a will. Now, here's where it gets a little more interesting. Not only do we have conflicting causes of death, both of which seem a little bit odd, but Adolf also lingered long enough to write a will. This will was written the day that he died. And we can see here, obviously he didn't write it out himself. It would have been dictated and then translated into legalese by the Justice of the Peace. It says, I, Adolf Hock, being in sound mind and disposing mind and memory, but infirm of health, and knowing that the frailty and uncertainty of human life, and being desirous of setting my worldly affairs in order while alive, etc., etc., is really a fairly wordy will compared to some of the others. There's also, and first I commend my immortal being to him who gave it, and my body to the earth to be buried with as little expenses as may be necessary. And then down below, he devotes all of his property to Carolyn, his wife, to be hers forever. And down below we can also see he might have been too sick to move very well at this point. He signed it, it says here, Adolf Hock, his mark, with an X. So he signed it with an X. But we can see that Carolyn, his wife, appears to have been literate because she was also made the executrix of his estate. And I'm still going through this. And this is an interesting thing, too. This is illustrative of why these people are sometimes hard to research. All through this, she's referred to as Catherine Hock. And then down at the bottom, she signs her name, Frau Carolina Hock. And spells it Ho, too, without the C. Still speaking in German here, calling herself Frau. And Carolina, it's interesting spelling, too. This is part of why these people can be very hard to research. We've got 2 or 3 different first names to pick from, 2 or 3 different last names to pick from, and these are just times when she was using her previous husband's last name. But neighbors around town were kind of nervous about her. There were multiple accounts. Most of what we know about her at all, honestly, is several neighbors said that they didn't think she'd find another husband anytime too soon. She was blind in one eye and not at all attractive. They were really not shy about saying that about her. But she did have money. He had left her with quite a bit of money. This bond talks about like security and the penalty of $3,000. I've got a lawyer I'm going to send this over to make figure out if it means all of what I think it does. Rachel, if you're watching out there, Rachel, my lawyer that I consult, is in line right now in Georgia to vote for Reverend Warnock. So hi, Rachel, if you're out there. But about 2 years later, January, a guy calling himself Jacob Huff arrived right here. Jacob Huff's real name was Jacob Schmidt, and later on he would take the name of Carolyn's ex-husband as his own. His first baptismal name would have been Johann, so his name was Johann Adolf Hock. Now here's we don't know exactly why he was calling himself Jacob Huff. This gets weirder and weirder. Like here's this list of departing passengers from Germany about a week or two before when the ship left, the SS Stuttgart. Now you can see here there's Jacob Schmidt, that was his real name, Horweiler. But down below, there's also a Jacob Reimb, which was very close to his first wife's original maiden name. And then down below, there also is a Jacob Huff leaving at the same time, too. And I can't figure out what happened to that Jacob Huff. It's all these little tantalizing clues that don't necessarily go anywhere. But in any case, he got to Wheeling calling himself Jacob Huff, and impressed people with his skills on the zither, impressed people with his singing ability, and also with all of his stories about having survived the Elbe, a ship that had just sank 30 miles off of the Hook of Holland, killing over 300 people. There were only about 20 survivors. But Jacob Huff in his saloon told people and told his minister that he was one of those few survivors. A little bit of fact-checking, if that had been available to him, would have taken care of that immediately. Newspapers published the names of like all 20 survivors. And also, the thing went down on January 30th. He bought his saloon by February 2nd. There's no way you can nearly drown 30 miles from the Hook of Holland on January 30th, then buy a saloon in West Virginia by February 3rd. Just doesn't work. But he talked up a big game. People seemed to like the guy, partly because he was awfully free with credit at his bar. He gave away lots and lots of drinks, so many so that some people assumed that the bar was probably just a bluff. It was probably just a front for something. But he was introduced to one of Reverend Haas's parishioners and ended up marrying Carolyn. And people thought that's an odd match. He's a very handsome man, and he's fascinating. She's blind in one eye and not attractive. Obviously, he's out for her money, and everybody seemed to know he was out for her money, and nobody even really seemed particularly bothered by this. About 3 weeks after the wedding, he had her write out a will, leaving all of her property to him to use the same as his own ever after. About a week or so after this will was written out, Carolyn took sick. Reverend Haas suspected that she had been poisoned. And days after that she died. She was buried very quickly. Hawk went around for a while telling everybody he was going to take all the money he had inherited from her and start a big concert hall and beer garden. But he'd also found out that Reverend Haas was going around trying to find out what kind of medicines he'd been buying anyway. So he stripped naked one day, left all of his clothes on the banks of the Ohio River, then took off for Chicago, making it look as though he had died by suicide in the Ohio River. Well, here's the newspaper's report. It deceived nobody. This was written like a week or so after the fact. Already everybody assumed that he had taken off. But that was that. All right, so that is what I have been working on today in this follow-up to the H.H. Holmes book. There were a lot of people claiming that there was a connection between Johann Hawk and H.H. Holmes. I don't really think there was, but I'll get into it, of course. So that's what I've been going through, is like looking over varying causes of death, trying to figure out what we can glean from such data we have about Carolyn, about her husband, about her previous husband, about what life was like in Boggs Run, West Virginia at the time. Well, I will tell you this. I looked up what real estate is like down around this area in South Wheeling. Houses about this size are going in a median price of $40,000 in this neighborhood. The highest price house in the neighborhood is $70,000, and they tend to be about this size. Some of them that look like this were going for like $9,000. You gotta wonder, what in the world must be wrong with these places? Besides, I don't know if the neighbors would like a family like mine moving into the vicinity. But all right, ladies and gentlemen, so that is your morning mini tour for today. That's what I've been working on all morning. That's what I'll be doing the next couple of days. So thanks a lot for joining me. We'll be back tomorrow with a surprise full-length tour. I might just do the whole Johann Hawk one again while I'm out here, because last time I did it in October, it had been a while since I had really been working on the case. And now the last 6 weeks since then, I've been knee-deep in this thing, just kind of eating, sleeping, and breathing it the last month or so, especially since October wrapped up. So, all right, thanks a lot for joining me, everybody. I am Adam for Mysterious Chicago Tours. Everybody go enjoy some ice water if you're not too hot right now. And I will talk to you guys soon. Thanks for joining me. I'm Adam from Mysterious Chicago Tours, saying stay safe, stay strong. And if you're on the Patreon down there, you'll be able to follow along with the progress of this book in real time. On the Holmes and Hawk tier, I'll be posting stuff as I go. So yeah, you guys can actually, between the mini tours and the Patreon, you can follow along with the progress of this book as it's written in real time. I haven't really told my agent I'm doing that yet, but you know what? She got no choice. That's how we're doing things around here. Christine asking, how do you follow me? Just go to Mysterious Chicago, the webpage on Facebook, and click follow or click like. It should start giving you alerts when I start broadcasting, which I do every morning at 10, plus full-length tours on Thursday nights. There's also the Patreon right down below there, patreon.com/AdamChicago. We have a lot of fun around here, so welcome anybody new. There's also a group on Facebook called Mysterious Chicago Regulars and Miles Fan Club. Miles is my cat. He was right over there. Looks like he's gotten up and moved. But all right, thanks everybody for joining me. I will talk to you guys soon. I'm Adam from Mysterious Chicago saying to stay safe, stay strong. Once again, hi out there to Rachel, who's in line to vote for Reverend Warnock in Georgia. Good luck. Good luck and stay spooky, everybody.